Okay. So, dear Catherine, can you tell us what is the difference between cash and digital money? Because I think that people don't understand the difference. They say that they already pay with cards. How would you explain to them that it's totally opposite?
So when I pay with cards, somebody can see everything I'm doing. And when I pay with cards, someone can take a skim. So the financial institutions can take a skim off of my local money and my local business. When I pay with cash, I can keep the transaction private, and it's much more economic for many of the businesses I do business with. Now, it's true that you can do these things with digital money through credit cards, but when you introduce CBDC, you just end up with much tighter control. So we all saw the truckers shut down in Canada by the central banks, by the central banking system. And we're talking about a system that with CBDC and other innovations makes it much easier not only to shut you down, but to take taxes out of your account without representation or without your permission, or to determine where you can go, where your money will work and what you're allowed to buy and who you're allowed to associate with.
Okay. And can you explain for us the core of that reinvention of money?
Control. So the core is control, but it requires an all-digital system, whether it's credit cards or central bank digital currency called CBDC. If you have an all-digital system, then you have complete control, and I can shut off your money if you don't do what I want. We've seen the top central banker in the world from the Bank of International Settlements in Switzerland announce and say publicly, we can make the rules and we can enforce them centrally.
And what will happen with commercial banks? Small will fall, but what with big ones?
So if you bring out central bank digital currencies, you can bring them out in a way where the customers have direct accounts at the central banks, or you can bring them out in a way that the banks have accounts at the central bank, and the central bank still, or the banks still do business with their customers. The reality is over time you can squeeze out the banks, and the question is how fast will the central banks do it? So my expectation is over time essentially most banks will be put out of business if we allow this to happen.
How is it all connected? WHO, digital money, pandemics?
ESG, maybe also, BlackRock. You can speak as every.
Right. So what we've been watching, as I said, is the centralization of the financial system. And that's currency, but it's also investments, it's also banking, it's all aspects of the financial system. And so what we've seen is the increasing control of currency leading to a CBDC. Many of the cryptocurrencies are simply prototypes to help get us there. But we're also seeing that in the investment business where the big investment managers like BlackRock and Vanguard try and dictate terms and conditions. So we're seeing the terms and conditions of what you can do and where you can go and how you can use your money impacted. And the way that everyone feels this is with inflation. Have you noticed prices going up? And that's because the central bankers inject money and give it to their friends, and so they are protected as the prices go up because more money is in circulation. So the way that every person feels this is more rules and regulations, but enormous inflation infecting not just your prices, but the time. You know, it's we feel like we're in a treadmill, and the inflation takes more and more and more of our time. It's a very extractive system.
And we all seen a viral video of Augustin Carstens, but can you tell us a little bit more about Bank of International Settlements?
So the Bank of International Settlements was created initially to process the reparations from Germany after World War I, but over time it was given sovereign immunity. And so you have a bank that can operate behind secrecy globally anywhere in the world. It's quite extraordinary. And they explain it all on their website. They are running what's called the innovation hubs to coordinate a system worldwide of bringing in CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, and they call them innovation hubs. And many of their hubs in the other countries operate behind sovereign immunity. They have the power to manage money and move it around the world behind complete secrecy. And when you coordinate with the other central banks who can print money out of thin air, it's a quite powerful infrastructure. And then you combine that infrastructure with the UN, the WHO, the World Bank, and the IMF also operating behind very sovereign immunities. And what we see is a machinery that is trying to build a system to essentially create digital concentration camps that strip our countries of their sovereign powers and individuals of their sovereign powers.
Okay, and one more specific question. Augustin Carstens was very enthusiastic about control, but Powell, I'm not sure, but Powell is a chairman of New York Fed. He was a little bit skeptical.
Yes.
On video.
Yes.
Can you explain that formal procedure problem?
So when Carstens said that, I was with my co-host John Titus. I was watching Carstens, and we were online together. And when Carstens said it, I said, "Did he really just say that?" And then Powell starts to talk, and Powell, you could see Powell was very concerned, because it's rare that a central banker tells you the truth, and Carstens, in my opinion, told remarkable truth. Powell is dealing with a population of 325 million Americans who have guns. And what Powell knew is he has said he needs legislation to do CBDC. So to implement, to get legislation passed in the US political environment in a way that makes transparent what Carstens had said to 325 million Americans who own guns and have state legislators who are under the Constitution more powerful than the federal government, was going to create a serious political problem. So Powell was clearly a little bit more reticent. And I showed yesterday the video of the president of one of the 12 federal banks. So the Federal Reserve has 12 private banks that run its train tracks. One of the presidents of one of those banks, Neil Kashkari, has said in a speech earlier at Columbia University, I can understand why the Chinese would want to do this, because it gives them complete surveillance and complete control, but why would Americans ever let this happen? And one of the speeches the central bankers give you is it'll help financial inclusion. Kashkari said, where's the evidence for that? Because there is none.
Maybe one more or two questions.
Okay.
NI from Nigeria, it collapsed. Is it any hope that CBDC will collapse and then they will not be able to implement it in real life?
So what they want is they want digital control of all financial transactions. They don't need CBDC to do that. They can do that with credit cards. They can do that with fast payment systems. They can do it by coordination, and they do this through the World Bank, coordinating the development of digital systems and fast payment systems globally. That's what they want. They want complete digital control. And I think that what they want is so antithetical to life and so destructive of both the environment and personal wealth that ultimately, as people understand how destructive this is for the land, how destructive this is for children, how destructive this is for families and personal health, they will push back. And my concern is the faster we push back, the less damage they can do. So ultimately, I think it can fail, but I think it can cause enormous destruction and death in the meantime. So the faster we push back, you know, one of my favorite performance artists is Tina Turner, and she says, we can do this nice or rough. The slower we push back, the rougher it's going to get. And that's my question. I would prefer for the pushback to come fast so that we can have a nicer transition than the rough one, because the rough one could be very rough.
And one more question. James Corbett had a very interesting video about Bitcoin and other uncentralized digital currencies. is it Bitcoin a sign? Is it initiation, testing of the...
So I believe Bitcoin was a prototype to bring in CBDC, and I think many people in a healthy, if we had a healthy governance system, private currencies, both local currencies or currencies like Bitcoin, would be wonderful if we could trust the digital system. But we can't trust the digital system. So to me, the only alternative to a digital system is to build relationships and transactions outside the system so we can't be controlled by digital systems. The problem is not Bitcoin, the problem is digital systems. But if we are dependent wholly and completely on digital systems, whether it's CBDC or Bitcoin or MasterCard or Visa, we're trapped in a digital concentration camp. So that's what we must do. We must, in a healthy system, we want both digital and analog, but we must never let them get us inside an all-digital system.
What can governments and parliaments do to keep the cash?
Tremendous amounts, tremendous amounts. First of all, they can encourage people in a variety of ways, and there are different laws depending on the jurisdiction that can help encourage that. And permit small business. For example, in the United States, we're now seeing small business charge a surcharge. If you want to use a credit card, you have to pay the amount of their transaction fee for their, so letting those kinds of things be legal. But the other thing they can do, which is so very important, and this is what some of the states in the United States are doing, they are working on making sure that the local citizens and the local banks and the government have independent payment systems. So a central bank or anyone outside the jurisdiction cannot control your ability to transact with each other. So when the new populist government during the financial crisis came into Greece, they discovered that their taxes were collected on payment systems that were controlled by corporate contractors that were loyal to the central bank. And so they couldn't get control of their own tax money. If you're going to have sovereignty, you have to have sovereignty control over your taxes and the information and telecommunication systems they operate on. So Parliament can ensure the creation and management and maintenance of independent payment systems, and that's very, very important. If you go to Solari, there's a panel on our website at solari.com, SOLAR.com. It says Financial Transaction Freedom Memo. And if you click on that, this is a memo I wrote to state legislators in one of the states in the United States. It was both the government officials and the legislatures said to me, what is financial transaction freedom? What threatens it, and how do we secure it? And so I wrote that with many, many links and lots of information. But if you are in any jurisdiction around the world, you should be able to convert that to what will work in your jurisdiction. But you want internally within your jurisdiction to be able to transact freely without anybody else being able to intercede and turn you into the Canadian truckers.
And one last question. You have a big experience in finance, and I would like to ask you to read the future. Will it happen some crisis, or globalists and propagandists will encourage people to get CBDC in some cheeky way? Will they give them money, or?
So I don't believe in prophecy. I believe in preparation. So there are many different scenarios, and one of the things, I can say about my former colleagues, because many of these people were my former colleagues, they kind of innovate as they go along, they make it up as they go. So we need to be prepared for real crises and manufactured crises. Both can happen. And that's why anything we can do to build local economic resilience and make sure, whether real or manufactured, we're protected. And because we need to create independent economic income and ability to transact without the big central systems being able to put us in the trick box. They want to make us dependent so they can force us on these digital systems. We want to walk away.
So act locally, think globally.
Yes, but act globally in a way that is profitable. We want to build the most critical ingredient to democratic process and freedom is family health and family wealth. We want to build a productive economy that supports our families being healthy and wealthy together. And so there are many ways of doing lots of businesses locally that just are unproductive and waste a huge amount of money. We want to be very, very productive in a way that builds our health and our wealth and builds strong families and strong children.